went down, the WNBA ratings have dropped over 55%.
Yikes.
Across the board.
Hey, guess what, guys?
The league is Caitlin Clark.
The league is Caitlin Clark. She is the WNBA, guys.
Sidelined with a left quad strain May 24th. National TV viewership has plunged since then 55%. Before the injury, her team, were averaging 1.81 million viewers, almost 2 million. Since her injury, fewer than 850.
Christine, the question everyone is asking right now is simple but brutal. How much does it actually hurt the WNBA when Caitlin Clark is sidelined? And the truth is, it doesn't just hurt, it completely devastates the league. Because what we're witnessing isn't a small dip or a temporary setback.
Jump to her groin likely because of compensation. But the thing that you have to be careful of is if, say, you try to rush her back from this injury as well, then you're getting into this territory where a very serious injury can happen. That is what the Indiana Fever, that is what Caitlin need to avoid the best that they possibly can. So if it means that Caitlin is out for 3 weeks, if it means that she is out all the way,
it's an outright collapse of interest the moment she steps off the court, and the numbers are staggering, with national television audiences cut in half, ticket sales crashing by over 70%, and arenas that were once overflowing suddenly looking empty. And all of this chaos makes one thing painfully clear. The WNBA has tied its entire future to a single player, and now that player is injured again, the league is staring down a financial and cultural disaster that it has no plan to stop. When Caitlin Clark went down with injury, the WNBA wasn't just dealing with one player sitting out, it was dealing with its entire foundation cracking in real time, because overnight, the league that had been breaking records and dominating headlines suddenly looked powerless without the one star who dragged them out of obscurity, and the data proves it beyond argument during the 5 games she missed earlier in the season. Overall, WNBA viewership didn't just dip.
Christine, how much does it hurt the WNBA when Caitlin Clark is out?
It is devastating to the WNBA when Caitlin Clark.
Now, I know a lot of us were expecting some sort of dip since Caitlin Clark has been out with injury, but I don't think all of us were expecting the entire viewership of the entire WNBA to be down. And this tweet from Christine Brennan really stuck out to me. She said, one player gets injured and more than half the TV audience for the entire league disappears. Has any other athlete ever had that kind of impact on a sport? Golf without Tiger definitely dropped precipitously on a case.
It collapsed by more than 50%, not just for the Indiana Fever, but across the entire league, which shows that Clark isn't just another rookie, she's the entire economic engine keeping the sport alive, and that brutal reality has left the WNBA scrambling to explain how one player's absence can turn their hottest season in decades into a ratings disaster almost instantly. The harsh truth hit on May 24th when Caitlin Clark was sidelined with that quad injury, and immediately the entire league felt the shockwave, because it wasn't just the Fever losing their star, it was the WNBA losing its only guaranteed ticket to relevance. And now, with her groin injury keeping her out again, no one knows when she'll be back, which means we're watching a painful rerun of what already happened weeks ago as attendance plummets, television ratings nosedive, and sponsors start to panic. And the danger here is even worse than before, because if the Fever rush her return, compensation injuries can spiral into something career-threatening. But if she sits out longer, the league bleeds millions more in lost momentum, putting both Caitlin's future and the WNBA's survival on a knife's edge. Nationally televised WNBA games absolutely cratered without Caitlin Clark, dropping by a jaw-dropping 55%. And to put that in perspective, when she was on the court, the league was averaging nearly 2 million viewers. But the second she sat out, that number collapsed to barely 847,000, which is an unthinkable free fall for any professional sport. And it didn't just affect the Fever, even their opponents saw their numbers collapse because fans weren't tuning in for teams, they were tuning in for Caitlin. And that exposes the uncomfortable truth the league refuses to admit. Caitlin Clark isn't just the biggest name in the WNBA, she is the WNBA. And without her, the entire product looks hollow, outdated, and irrelevant, leaving executives scrambling while fans switch off in droves. While Caitlin Clark was out there filling arenas, shattering television records, and printing money for the league, the WNBA was doing the exact opposite by leaving its most valuable player completely unprotected, letting opponents target her night after night, as if taking out the league's entire economic engine was just part of the game. And what makes it worse is that Clark accounts for more than a quarter of all WNBA economic activity, yet instead of shielding her like every other professional league does with its superstars, the WNBA kept hiding behind excuses about basketball plays, and now they're paying the price because her absence has exposed just how fragile the league really is, with revenues collapsing, fans furious, and the narrative turning from celebration to crisis in record time. This season was supposed to be the turning point for the WNBA, the moment they proved women's basketball could thrive on a national stage, but Caitlin Clark's injury has flipped that script into a nightmare because the league is heading into critical CBA negotiations at the end of the season, with its biggest bargaining chip now sitting on the sidelines, and that collapse in viewership is more than just numbers on a chart. It's fans openly boycotting games because they're tired of watching the league mistreat the very player who brought them in. And that sends a brutal message to sponsors, networks, and investors that without Clark, the WNBA can't hold its audience, can't fill its seats, and can't deliver on its promises, leaving everyone questioning whether this league is truly ready for the future or already crumbling under its own mismanagement. The financial collapse without Caitlin Clark has been instant and brutal, with fever ticket prices dropping by more than 70%, some crashing from over $800 to barely $200, and the average ticket for her missed games plummeting from well over $1,000 to as little as $80, which proves beyond doubt who is really driving demand. And those marquee matchups that were moved into larger arenas to handle Clark's star power are now half empty. A humiliating sight for a league that claimed it was finally breaking through. Even the Chicago Sky vs. Fever rematch, which once drew more than 2 million viewers, became just another forgettable game without her, showing that fans aren't tuning in for the WNBA brand, they're tuning in for Clark. And without her, this so-called breakout season is collapsing into a harsh reminder of how irrelevant the league was before she arrived. What makes this spiral even more alarming is that Caitlin Clark is only a rookie, and she's already on her second major injury in just 1 month, first the quad strain and now the groin issue, and that raises a terrifying question. Will the WNBA's brightest star become the player who's always hurt? A storyline we've seen derail careers in other sports, with names like Anthony Davis or Joel Embiid constantly tied to injuries, and the responsibility here falls squarely on the league and the Fever, because they keep throwing her into hostile environments where opponents hack, shove, and foul her without consequence, creating long-term risks that could shorten her career. Yet, instead of acting, the WNBA seems content to let its golden ticket take brutal punishment every game. And if they don't sit her out now and protect her properly, they're not just jeopardizing Caitlin's future, they're gambling away the survival of the entire league. The most frustrating part is that none of this had to happen because the warning signs were flashing in neon lights the entire time, with veteran journalist Christine Brennan and countless analysts calling out the WNBA for failing to protect the one player who carries the league on her back. Yet, instead of stepping up, the league allowed Clark to be hammered by cheap fouls, targeted by rivals, and left vulnerable in games where every bump risked a new injury, and the numbers prove just how catastrophic that failure has been, because Clark alone accounts for more than half of all league television viewers, meaning the moment she goes down, ratings, ticket sales, and merchandise all collapse together. And it's the same pattern over and over again. The WNBA talks about growing the game while letting jealousy and bad officiating sabotage the only superstar who actually made people care, turning what could have been a historic season into a self-inflicted disaster. At the end of the day, the lesson here could not be more obvious. Caitlin Clark isn't just the face of the WNBA, she is the entire foundation holding the league together, and the fact that her absence instantly wipes out more than half the audience, destroys ticket prices, and collapses sponsorship, momentum should terrify every executive in women's basketball. Yet, instead of protecting her, the league has turned every game into a circus of hard fouls and cheap shots, gambling with the only player who makes them money, and if they don't act now, the consequences will be permanent because fans are already walking away, sponsors are already hesitating, and Clark's health is hanging by a thread. So the question is no longer whether the WNBA can survive without her. We've already seen it can't. The real question is whether the league will finally wake up and protect its greatest asset before it's too late, or whether it will keep making the same mistakes until the empire Caitlyn built crumbles back into irrelevance.